There's an old song from the late 1960s that I believe is a description of an acid trip. It's by a group called the Amboy Dukes, and I've borrowed its title for today's session, Journey to the Center of Your Mind, or of the Mind in my case. So it's not about a drug trip in this case, it's about a technique that we can use in mindfulness to help establish a sense of presence. We also are combining this today with another study of things that we start to react to, ways in which we start to react when life around us seems to be very uncertain and there's a lot of turmoil. And again, we're dealing still with the virus, so it's a good time to review ways that we can sort of wrestle with this, get our arms around it, and hopefully get to a place where we're a little healthier and can lead still as full and as profitable a life as possible. Hi, I'm Steve from Steve White Yoga, offering you the tools of yoga to manage your health, improve your relationships, and balance your life. Come on if you care, come on if you dare, and let's see what we do in today's session. Misidentification is sort of the foundation of yoga, and I'll explain that a little bit more in a minute. But yoga kind of prides itself in taking the stance that we tend to form our self-view based on the sum of our total experiences in life. So it's like the labels that we assign to ourselves or that are assigned to us by others, sometimes people who are influential, sometimes by events. So our self-definition rests in our successes and failures, in the roles that we have in life, in what we possess or don't possess, either physical objects or qualities, what we've gained or lost, and in how we appear to the outside world. And so this is sort of from the very traditional standpoint of yoga, this is sort of the starting point. It's like, okay, accept that this is part of the human condition. We're just sort of wired this way. And yet, there is a choice. So it's sort of a case of mistaken identity in a sense. And I'll just give you the Sanskrit word, which is avidya. And it is the very human process of identifying with our external circumstances and what we are or see ourselves to be, or what we're not or what we don't see ourselves to be. And we ignore in the process of this identification the sort of unchanging internal and, according to the tradition, eternal and connected life that is within us. So there's sort of the superficial self, which is made up of our beliefs about who we are, and then there is the true self. And, you can call that spirit or soul or God if it resonates with you. Or a common translation in the yoga world is consciousness, like supreme consciousness. And we're just part of this. We're part of this matrix of life, and that is fundamentally who we are. And the rest of it is just sort of coating over the top. And we've talked about this in past sessions. So in yoga, this is sort of the equivalent of original sin in the Christian tradition. It's the idea that we are fundamentally flawed in our own view. And I'm not trying to preach or not preach Christianity or anything else, but I think every religious tradition has its sort of equivalent of this. And in the yoga world, which is more a philosophical tradition, I suppose, it is suggested that part of our work in life is to sort of get beyond this notion that we have these labels that form who we are. So whether you believe it or not, whether you accept it or not, is entirely up to you. I'm just presenting a perspective, and it's an interesting one to consider. So to the extent that we tend to equate ourselves with labels, with experiences, characteristics, roles we play in life, or possessions, these things, according to yoga, have to be not really swept away. It's not like they don't exist, because they certainly exist, but they're given too much weight. They're given too much power over how we act in life. So I sometimes refer to this as the photo album. So it's like we have this photo album of experiences, and they've been, pictures that have been placed there consciously or unconsciously or subconsciously, that have come together to represent our experience of who we are. So it seems like a continuum, because that's how our brain sort of organizes things. So we're this person called me, or Steve in my case, and because the brain puts us together that way, we kind of consider ourselves to be this whole, unified, and defined being. So the thing that yoga says is, well, here's the thing. We see ourselves as fixed, like I am Steve, but really, how unchanging are we? And, we've all had these experiences in life where it's like, you have a really good day and things are going well, and you've just kind of got the world by the, you've got the world within your grasp, and then something happens, and it might be a distinct event, or it might be a series of events that occur over a time, but that confidence, that sort of sense of self, erodes and can be replaced by dread or anger or worry, or whatever it might be, fear of some sort. And so yoga says, hey, everything's changeable. Your health, your circumstances, your self-confidence, your retirement fund. There are days where I'm completely comfortable and relaxed and thrilled to be teaching. And there are days where, for whatever reason, I am, sort of lack that confidence, or feel like I'm not qualified to teach, or all kinds of weird things go through my head. And so this is sort of, indicative of our entire experience of life. So it's like we're blowing in the wind, subject to circumstances, subject to whatever changes come along. For particularly sensitive people, especially like introverted people, it can be subject to, if somebody looks at you the wrong way, and it's like, oh, they must be mad at me, or something like that. So, to varying degrees, we all have this experience. I think there's one more point here. Yeah. So we define ourselves in terms of our separateness, in terms of being a thing that has characteristics that's different from every other thing that's roaming around the planet. And with very little awareness or recognition or really respect for our connection. So that's the point. That took longer to say than I thought it would, but you get the idea. So here's Carolyn Myss again, Mace, her name's pronounced Mace, who we've seen quoted before. When you do not seek or need external approval, you are at your most powerful, which is sort of another way of looking at this same issue. So from a practical level, the more we are able to sort of break our identification with our external orientation, the freer we are to uncover and to understand, who we are, what our purpose is in life, and to act with, without the restrictions of feeling like we have to prove something or disprove something or whatever it might be. So an interesting question to ask in this realm is, what of our self-view, what in our photo album might not really be true? We've come to accept it as being true, or we've decided it has to be true. But what if it isn't? Does that change anything? So for most of us, even reflecting on that question brings up the idea of, well, I might be able to say that I really am smart, but how is somebody else going to feel about it? In my case, how are my students going to feel about it if I'm teaching? Or how is my family going to feel about it if I'm in a family event? Or how are my friends going to feel about it, or whatever? So we have this habit sort of looking to some other source of reference beyond ourselves even when we're trying to decide that it's okay to not be subject to all these labels. So it's an interesting process, and one that, interestingly, can be dealt with through a meditative process. So the Dalai Lama has a little bit different way of saying approximately the same thing. Big D says, trust the power of heart and awareness to awaken in all circumstances. So heart speaks to the same thing as soul or consciousness. These are all very equal terms or terminology that sort of represent the same idea. It's a big leap and maybe even a foreign concept to come to the conclusion that it sort of doesn't matter where we land or how we land in life. The idea is that we don't have to be stuck in this. We need to worry about things. We need to strive to avoid or fix or accumulate or whatever it might be in order to sort of substantiate our existence, to justify who we are. So if we stop trying so hard to live up to the photo album, whatever that might be, and just to relax into grace and into possibility, everything changes. So that's what we're going to do a little bit of today, just as a fun experiment to sort of do a practice considering how circumstances, in particular under the virus, now that we're all subject to this common challenge in life, how the virus may alter our outlook or our attitude or our self-image and the way that we interact in life. So that's the idea. So enough of me talking. Well, I get to talk some more, but I'll talk different. I'll talk different now. So sort of settle into your seat, or very much settle into your seat. And soften into your sitting bones. Soften into your space. So we'll take a few moments to reflect on sort of self-identity, how we define ourselves. Maybe to open up the photo album a little bit and just take a look at some of the pictures and see how we're represented, how we're represented in terms of how we feel, how we think, how we act. Not in a critical or judgmental way, but with kindness and openness as we do. And with understanding and recognition that just because we feel a certain way today or think a certain way today or act a certain way today, it doesn't have to be permanent. And in fact, like everything in life, it's not permanent. It will change. For better, for worse, directed or undirected. So as you settle in, find a sense of support. Maybe it's physical support from the floor or whatever you're sitting on. Maybe it's support in terms of just your environment, if it's fairly peaceful. And allow this to be, for the next few minutes, your place of exploration. And then find your anchor in breath, in sound, or in sensation. And release your awareness for a few moments into that place, whichever it is. Now we'll use part of our practice to engage in this particular process that I referred to as the journey to the center of the mind. This is actually one of my favorite techniques to use. And it's just another option. It isn't like this is the right one or the wrong one in any particular circumstance, but it's another way of sort of presenting this practice of mindfulness And so, with eyes closed, can you can you detect soft light filtering through your eyelids? And I'm going to presume nobody's in total darkness right now. Now, can you take that light into your mind as if like there's a space at the center of your head somewhere where you're receiving that soft light that's coming through your eyelids? So, in this space, you're receiving these sort of visual signals. And then shift awareness for a moment and bring it to your breath. And as you draw air in through your nose, can you imagine the energy of the breath coming to this same space, sort of as a physical location, sort of at the center, right at the center of your head, at the center of your mind, if you will? So that each in breath is being drawn into that space. And you can add, if you wish, even that each out breath originates from that same space. And then shift your awareness once again. And notice sound and see if you can get the experience of sound traveling into this same interior space, the same space where we accepted light, where we accepted breath, now accepts sound. So into the inner ear and even past that physical point, so that you're receiving sound at the center of your mind. And then relax that effort for a few moments and think back, if you will, like maybe to, let's say, roughly a year ago. It doesn't have to be precise. And recall where you were, in general terms at least, sort of what role you were playing in life or roles you were playing in life at that time. Maybe recall some of the things that were going on around you. It might be specific events or just general, if you have kids, the kids were in school. I was in Italy. And establish sort of a general sense of what your life was like at that time. It can be based on specific memories, or it might just be sort of a general recollection, but just recalling how things were. So again, we're trying not to attach judgment to this or analysis to it. It's just simply an observational recollection, if you will. As we like to use the metaphor of film, it's like, playing back the newsreel from a year ago. So relax that recollection for a moment and recognize that a lot of things certainly can have occurred over the course of the last year. And in your life, some of them may be considered to be positive things, improvements, gains, and some might be losses or challenges or uh, less pleasant circumstances. And without assigning the quality to anything, just consider for a moment how your life has changed just in terms of the impact of the virus since a year ago. So it's sort of a observational comparison of what's happened to alter, or what has altered rather, what has altered your roles in life, how you conduct your life on a daily basis, maybe in running your house or dealing with a job if you have that kind of job that's affected. Maybe how it's affected you financially. Just notice what's different. And we're not trying to draw into a drama. We're just like going down a checklist and saying, what's changed? Maybe something's changed in your attitude, in your outlook on life, in your feelings about yourself or your life. So, I think there are probably some people that haven't been incredibly affected by all of this stuff, but we all have to admit, I think, that at the very least, lifestyle has changed for almost everybody, unless you're, well, unless you're like me and kind of a recluse. I'm not really a recluse, but I've stayed in a lot. And I'm lucky to have stayed in a lot. But whatever the case, um, these changes are real, but they're just part of the life continuum looked at from a perspective. Whether the changes were as a result of a virus or as a result of any one of zillions of things that may happen in life, the changes are there. And it's easy to become wrapped up in the fact that things have changed. And I'm not trying to be cavalier about it or belittle the fact that life is different. But as we've said before in these sessions, these are things that are beyond our control. And whether there are things that have changed for the better or not, whether life is completely upside down or not, relative to the way it was, the reality exists. And sometimes it can be really helpful, instead of focusing intently and regularly on the reality, to focus on how we can change our response to the reality. It is up to us to either let outside circumstances direct us, to be blowing with the direction of the wind, whatever it might be, or to begin to focus a little bit more intently on our inner life so that we can be directed from our heart rather than from whatever occurs. And this is the only constancy that we really have the ability to control, ultimately. to stay present, to stay centered, to stay grounded, to train ourselves to be at rest, even when the winds of change are a-blowing. So let's come back now to the center of the mind. And just to change it up, let's start with the breath. So as breath comes in, can you imagine or have the experience even of drawing the energy of the breath right into that space at the center, somewhere in the middle of the head? And perhaps even releasing energy from there back out into space. Can you then focus on sound as if the source of your hearing were located in that space at the center of the mind? So that as you receive sound, you're receiving it somewhere deep within the mind. Staying out of the arena of analyzing, criticizing, concluding, just accepting sound, coming to that center. And then changing again to notice what light is being received through the filter of eyelids, and experiencing the source of that perception being in that same space, the center of the mind. Now, for a little additional challenge, and this isn't going to work for everyone, can you have the sense of soft light coming into that center, at the same time accepting breath into that center? And to juggle all three balls at the same time, having sound coming into that center. So we're receiving breath, light, and sound, all being experienced at the center of the mind. This takes a little more practice, but if it's something that appeals to you, this is a good practice to try out for a week or so, and to use as another tool in the toolbox We have several at this point for those who have been following along for some time. But a good way to sort of establish and to keep presence with still allowing a little bit of entertainment into the equation, I suppose, because we're trying to work with these three balls of breath and light and sound. But it's a good one. If you got value out of today's video, I hope that you hit the like button below. And for more great videos on mindfulness and other issues with yoga off the mat, please subscribe. You can also visit my website, stevewhiteyoga.com, for additional information. Until next time, keep on breathing.